Hello everybody, it's Mr. Adam here. Today we're going to take a look at Section C of EdExcel's IGCSE English Language B exam. Now, the exam as a whole is 100 points. 40 points come from Section A, 30 points come from Section B, and the last 30 points come from Section C. Now, what makes Section C unique when compared to Section A and B is that it doesn't rely on any text. It just comes from your head. The 30 points in Section A are split between two assessment objectives. 20 of the points come from Assessment Objective 4, which is your ability to communicate effectively and imaginatively, adapting form, tone, register of the writing for specific purpose and audience, which means can you write to your audience and for your purpose. And Assessment Objective 5, which takes the other 10 points, is your spelling, punctuation, and grammar. So write clearly using a range of vocabulary and sentence structures with accurate spelling, paragraphing, grammar, and punctuation. So 20 points is Assessment Objective 4, and 10 points is Assessment Objective 5. Now, what makes Section C unique in other ways is that they actually give you a choice between an opinion task, a creative writing task, which is a story, or a descriptive writing task. And you could choose only one, so you can't do more than one. And you have to let them know as soon as you start writing which one you are choosing by putting an X into the number which you choose. So in this past paper, which is an actual past paper that was done in 2019, you have three options. So question number 9 asks you, it's better to live a life rather than to read about it. To what extent do you agree with this? Question number 10, write a story, true or imaginary, entitled Friendship. Hint, we're actually going to do this one. Together, we're going to write it. Or question number 11, describe an experience that has made a positive difference to you. So each of them is obviously 30 points because you choose one. And again, 20 points come from Assessment Objective 4 and 10 points come from your spelling, punctuation, and grammar. The other thing that makes this section unique is that there's actually a word parameter, a word limit. They tell you that you should write approximately 400 words, which means 350 to 450. Now, going way above 400, for example, 700, 800, 900 words, which is very possible when you get kind of into it, is somewhat of a bad idea. One, it just means that your writing is not concise. And two, it's wasting time, precious time that you could use on improving the other sections of your test, or even going over this section, making sure that your grammar and spelling and punctuation are all strong, making sure that you have all the necessary elements in your writing to make sure you score the maximum points. So to help you out with this, what we're going to do is we're actually going to tackle one of these together. And like I said earlier, we're going to tackle the creative writing one, the question 10. They're all creative writing, but I like this one the most because I feel like it gives you the most flexibility, because you could kind of write about anything as long as the title Friendship is kind of tied into it's like a theme throughout your writing. So question 10 says, write a story, true or imaginary, entitled Friendship. So I guess if we're working on the actual exam paper, and I'm going to try to work as close as possible with this paper so you can take a look at what it's like to write on the actual exam. The first thing I would need to do is I would need to put an X through question 10, letting the examiner know that that's the question you should be checking. Okay. The next thing is I'm probably going to use this space to plan out my writing a little bit. And when it comes to section C, planning out your writing means knowing ahead of time elements that you want to use in your paper. So I'm just going to call this a plan. Okay, that's an N. Actually, to make this a little bit easy to write, I'm going to choose it. Okay, here we go. So this is going to be my plan. Okay, and the requirement is that the story needs to be called Friendship. Okay, that's kind of the only limiting parameter. So you can't write about your own solo journey through the universe, because it might be hard to find friendship in a solo means by yourself, in a solo journey. So things that you want to do when you're planning. First thing first, you want to be clear which types of literary devices, techniques that you must pay attention to when writing your own story. And there are certain things that are kind of like, you must have this, either because it's very, very important, or because it's so easy to use, it's kind of, it would be a shame not to have it. So for me, I'm going to kind of divide the paper in two. I'm going to say I must have these, and these will be good to have. Okay, I'm going to change my pen color. One, because I can. It's so easy to change your pen color. Why not two? So you can kind of see the difference. First thing you must have is a narrative voice. Okay, and narrative voice, for those of you that forgot, it means which person, which perspective are you writing? Are you writing from the first person, second person, or third person? Okay, that's a must. You have to establish that. And it's probably with a story like Friendship, I feel that I'm going to write in the first person. Okay. The other thing that you want to keep in mind, again, because of assessment objective 4, is who your audience is going to be. Okay. Okay, and it's just kind of like an educated person. And what that simply means is that you don't have to explain to them that the sky is blue, but you might need to explain to them what a very specific item is in your story that they might not be familiar. Okay, so just an educated person. That's kind of like you just keep in mind. The purpose of your writing is maybe to entertain. Okay, there might be another purpose, for example, to entertain and educate. Sometimes that's kind of to entertain, maybe to motivate also. I'll add that here. Let me just do it with a different pen. And also to motivate, especially with a title like Friendship. Maybe my story also wants to motivate. Going back to, then there are certain things like I want to have, because they're so simple. Like I definitely want to have at least one simile in my story. I want to have maybe a metaphor. And the reason why I say that I should have them, because they're kind of easy to come up with. Like there are comparisons that we make so often in our day-to-day life that it would be a shame not to use the opportunity to include those in there. Then the other things that I want to include is character through action, which simply means, I'm going to kind of abbreviate here. This is character through action, which simply means that I'm going to use the action that things act. That's a C. I'm going to use the actions, the acts, which my character does to show me something about his personality, right? I'm going to reveal something deeper about the character by what he or she does. Dialogue, that's definitely an important thing. By what my character will say, I'm going to try to show the reader something deeper about that character. Or the dialogue will have a very specific purpose. So I definitely want to have dialogue in my story. Then another important thing to have is some sort of sensory detail. And sensory details are things that describe our five senses. So our sight, our auditory sense, our olfactory, which is smell, our taste, and our touch. So the five senses. So make your writing descriptive enough that the reader can see, hear, smell, taste, or feel certain aspects of what's going on in your story. The other thing, super duper important, it's so important I'm going to change the color of my pen for it. I'm going to write it in orange. Okay. Setting. Okay. Setting means where your story, the location and the time of your story. That definitely has to be in there. So make sure you have setting. And setting can definitely tell us a lot about the story beyond than, the walls of his room were white. That might tell us something about his pureness, his personality, how he was innocent. Okay. Actually, there's a couple of more things that are, very important to have. Yeah, okay, so let me make a list of things. I'm going to change the color of my pen again. I'm going to make it this magenta color. Are good to have, which means that if I don't have them, it's not a huge deal. But if I could fit them in somehow, it's just going to make my story richer. It's just going to make my writing that much more interesting. All right, and for that, I have onomatopoeia. Okay, let me make sure I spelled correctly. Onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia. Always forget this word. EIA. There it is. Onomatopoeia. So onomatopoeia is kind of like when the word itself, like buzz, has the same sound as the sound it describes. So bang, buzz, clap. So certain words that the word itself mimics the sound it makes. Then personification. Personification is when a non-living thing takes the attribute of, not even a non-living thing, even an animal, when an animal takes the characteristics of a human, then we call that personification. So the wind kept howling my name, right? The wind cannot call anybody's name, but we just kind of attribute a quality of a person to a non-living or an animal. The other thing that might be good to have is irony. And the easiest irony, I guess, is sarcasm. But that has to be cleverly done. Especially in a short piece of writing, it might be difficult to build situational irony. But a little bit of sarcasm might be easier to do. Sarcasm. The other thing that might be, let me see. Oh, euphemism. Euphemism is, let me just spell it out here. Euphemism. Euphemism is when we, instead of saying a thing directly, which might be too harsh or might be too rude or might be too inappropriate, we substitute that for a softer phrase. So instead of saying, for example, dead, her grandfather died, we say her grandfather passed away. Or instead of saying, oh, he's fat, we say he is big boned, or he has a very wide posture, or something like that. When we substitute something that might be rude or might be uncomfortable, it's something more comfortable. Repetition is another repetition, something that I might have. And these are things that you're not just kind of thinking up on the test itself. It's kind of like a list you come into the test with, like important things to have and maybe good things, easy things to add in here or there. The other thing is colloquial language, like slang maybe. So colloquial language. And this depends on what type of story I'm writing. If I'm writing a story that's about a very formal meeting, maybe between presidents of the world, I might not have colloquial language. But if I'm writing a story about a teenager who spends a lot of his time outside, with his friends, to make that story more realistic, I might need to use some colloquial language. The other thing that I might want to have is like similar to repetition is a rule of three. And a rule of three is just kind of says that it's better. I think this has to do with maybe human psychology. When we make a list of something, like when we describe somebody, we describe them with three adjectives. For example, he was tall, dark, and handsome. She was smart, quirky, and beautiful. Right? So instead of just using two adjectives or four adjectives, for some reason, humans are more comfortable with that number. So rule of three, it makes them feel a little bit better. The other thing that I might use is juxtaposition. Juxtaposition. It's an O. Juxtaposition. And juxtaposition is just putting two things that are different next to each other, so the effect of their difference is felt. So you can, for example, describe how tall an athlete was by first describing somebody who's very short. Okay, so Melissa was about 1 meter 20 centimeters, and when she approached James, who stood at 2.5 meters tall, the difference between them felt like earth and the skies. Something, you would just put two different things near each other to make sure that their difference is sharply felt. And I think that's it. I scribbled some things here on my paper before I started the video. I'm just kind of looking through it to see if I might have forgotten something. And this is not like an extensive list of all possible devices that you could use. This is just kind of easier ones that you can use. And I'm sure that as you're watching this video, you might kind of remember some that you like to use. Yeah, go for it. It's kind of your style is also an important element here. All right, so keeping our plan in mind and keeping in mind the question, which again is write a story, true or imagined, entitled Friendship. Let's take a look at the story. Now, I wrote the story a little bit ahead of time just to kind of make the video go faster, but you shouldn't spend more than, let's say, 40 to 60 minutes on Section C, because Section C is 30 points, but the other 70 points come from Section A and B. All right. Without further ado, let's take a look at the story. Okay, so here's the question again. I'll put it on top. And let's get started writing. Thump bump, thump bump, thump bump. My feet hit the track as I ran towards the finish line. The other runners, like tigers, lions, and jaguars, running behind me, each trying to get to the meet at the finish line. All around me, thousands of screaming fans jumping up and down in the bleachers. The sun was hot enough to vaporize the entire ocean, and the wind was fast enough to break down every tree on the planet. My heart, trying to break free from my chest, beat harder and faster with each step. Sweat poured down my body in gallons. I tried to focus my eyes on the finish line, but I couldn't help but look back at the stallion creeping in behind me. It was my friend Jamal. We were the fastest runners on the team, but I was always a bit faster. On any other day, I wouldn't care which of us came in first, but today was different. The winner of the race would get an interview with the best colleges in the country and possibly a full scholarship. I had to win. Jamal's family lives in a mansion, but my parents, well, let's just say we were economically challenged. Stop looking back at me, shouted Jamal. Keep your eyes on the finish line. I just wanted you to see my face before they take a picture for the world record book, I joked. For what? The man with the smelliest feet? Jamal laughed. Eat my dust, sucker. I smiled back at him, and then I sped up even faster. The growing distance between us bringing me closer to the finish line. I had 50 meters to the end. I tuned out the screams of the crowd. I had 40 meters to the end. I focused my eyes on the line. I had 30 meters to the end. My legs were on fire. I had 20 meters to the... A loud scream stopped me in my tracks. I looked back. Jamal had tripped and fallen. My legs were pulling me to the finish line, but my heart was pulling me towards my friend. My heart pulled me towards my friend. With the other runners swooshing past me, I ran back to Jamal. Give me your hand, I said. But you're going to lose the race, he replied. I'd rather lose a race than lose a friend. I extended my hand. Now give me your hand. I pulled him up and we both slowly made it to the finish line. Last in the race, but first in friendship. And that's my story. I made a mistake here. The growing distance between us was bringing me closer to the finish line. But all in all, we have 423 words right here, 423 words, which is just above the 400 word limit. And if we take a look at the plan we had right here, I did try to use most of these. Let's take a look at where we could find each of these. Okay, so as far as we have thump bump, thump bump, thump bump. That's onomatopoeia. That's the words that mimic the sound. As far as narrative voice, my, I, so that's all first person. So I'm writing from the point of view of the character. Simile, we definitely had like tigers, lions, and jaguars. So I'm describing the other runners who are behind me, like tigers, lions, and jaguars, trying to get to the meat. That's also a little bit metaphorical. There's I didn't mention it in my plan, but there's also a plot here. Like the story moves along from beginning to middle to the end. Dialogue, I definitely have dialogue, and we could even say that the dialogue reveals something about their friendship, and it reveals that they like to joke with each other, that they're friendly, and that they care about each other. So even though that Jamal, his friend, was behind him, he still told him to keep his eyes on the finish line and not be distracted. So that tells us something about his friend Jamal. So even though they're competitors, their friendship comes first. And then character through action. Well, that's actually the biggest element in my story, because even though he wanted to win and there was a lot on the line, he went back. He went back to Jamal. He went back to help his friend. Then let's see, sensory details. So sensory details, I kind of try to fit in here at the end. Sweat poured down my gallons, which is actually also a hyperbole. I didn't mention this before, but a hyperbole is when you exaggerate something to show an effect. Like you could never have sweat poured down in gallons. But if I describe it that way, it just shows that he was sweating a lot. And the heart, that's definitely a sensation of touch. You feel your heart beating fast. And the sun, you definitely feel that. And the sound of thousands of fans screaming, that's sensory details. Personification. So I don't know if I used personification here, but if I wanted to, I could probably work in something with the sun doing something. So the sun was burning, or again, you don't have to remember personification. If we look back at the original list, it was on the good to have, but if I don't have it, it's not a huge problem. Then sarcasm. I didn't get sarcasm in here. It wasn't. I wasn't successful at, but again, it was something that if you can work in, great. If not, it's not a huge problem, because there's definitely a lot of other things. Euphemism. Euphemism is, I definitely did use euphemism. Instead of saying we were poor, he said we were economically challenged, right? So maybe poor is a little bit too harsh or too offensive in some cases. So he said my family was economically challenged. Then colloquial language. So sucker, even, where are we here? Well, eat my dust, sucker. That's definitely one of the biggest examples of colloquial language. Something you probably wouldn't use in formal speech, but that just shows something about their friendship, that they were friendly enough to kind of call each other and make jokes about it. So even the jokes are colloquial. Repetition. There was repetition with onomatopoeia, the thump bump, thump bump, thump bump. That's also rhythm. Then rule of three, I definitely try to use that one, like tigers, lions, and jaguars. So that those three. And juxtaposition, there's a lot of, I think, juxtaposition, but one particular example is Jamal's family lives in a mansion while my family was economically challenged. So kind of putting Jamal's family, they're very wealthy and we're very poor. That creates a little bit of tension in the story, because even though he's my friend, he has opportunities that I don't have. Okay. And that's kind of the story. And looking at how successfully I could be graded, we have two criteria. So assessment objective 5, which is my grammar, spelling, and punctuation. This checks how successful, how diverse, so how good is my grammar and spelling and punctuation, and how diverse. So I have a full range of punctuation marks, and it's precise. And if you look at the original original text, I've even used quotation marks for dialogue. I had even a colon here, different sentence structure. I'll try to post this in the comments or send it to you through Google Classroom so you can see what's going on in the story slowly. You could look at the punctuations. I might have made a mistake here or there. I try to avoid it, but even as I was reading, I told you I forgot a verb here. The growing distance between us was bringing me closer. But I think that as far as spelling, punctuation, grammar, that this example would get, so assessment objective 5, it would get a 10 out of 10. And assessment objective 4, which is 20 points. Let's just go to that page. Assessment objective 4, communicate effectively and imaginatively, adapting form, tone, register for specific purpose and audience. So my audience was an educated person, and I think this is fine. There's nothing here that makes it too much for experts and too much for, let's say, children. It's kind of that perfect middle where everybody could understand it. And my purpose was to entertain and possibly to motivate and to inspire people to have stronger friendships and see the importance of friendships. And I think that was very well accomplished. And I communicated effectively, and it's perceptive and subtle. My vocabulary has a particular function in the text. It's focused. I kind of, in that 423 words, I stayed where I was supposed to stay. I didn't begin to describe how, for example, Jamal's family got rich. That would have kind of been going out of the story. And it's unnecessary. Just kind of what's in the story, what has to be there. There's definitely sophisticated control of text. I'm giving myself compliments here, but I hope you understand that I built this example so you can see what a successful section C response would be. Obviously, as a teacher, it's a little bit easier for me to accomplish this, but I hope that it shows you how you too can accomplish. I don't feel that it's so far of a difficult example that it's impossible for students to achieve, but it definitely requires practice. So don't think that you can just go in on the test and write a story like that. It definitely it takes you sitting down and trying to write it out, and then reading over your own story, making sure that as far as you know that there is no grammar, punctuation, or spelling mistakes. As far as you know, you're not going into a million different directions. You're staying focused. You're practicing. You're making plans like I made a plan here, trying to use all of these things into one cohesive story. Okay, so out of the assessment objective 4, I think this story would get 20 out of 20. Again, giving us a full 30 points in section C. We have our word count where I think this story could be written in under 60 minutes, giving you enough time even to check your work, which is very important. In the homework assignments that we do, there's plenty of opportunity for you to write stories, right? And when you write those stories, it's very important that you take the opportunity to plan, to say, oh, here are the things that I must have in my story. Here are the things that are good enough for me, are good ideas for me to have in my story. Okay? Anyway, guys, stay healthy, stay safe, wash your hands, and practice. I'll see you guys in class.